friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. I'm really excited about today's video because today, April 22nd, is my third Booktube-aversary. 3 years ago today, I made my first video on Booktube and have loved it ever since. I decided as a way to celebrate my 3 years on Booktube, I would highlight some of the books that I have absolutely loved over the last 3 years. Many of them were recommended by other booktubers. Many of them I probably never would have found on my own had I not been a part of this community and been watching videos of other people and just grown my knowledge base of books that were out there because of Booktube. So I'm so thankful that all of these books are now favorites of mine, and it's all because of Booktube. So I just want to celebrate today with telling you about some of my favorite books. And if you stay tuned to the end, I do have a giveaway. I did not put it in the thumbnail or the title because it's just for you, my subscribers, to celebrate you having been here with me, whether you've been here for today, it's your first day, or you've been here with me all 3 years, or somewhere in the middle. So I do have a little giveaway to share with you, and let's just jump right into the books. I'm gonna do this by year. So 2016 was my first year on Booktube, even though I started in April, so it's not a full year, but I have about 5 or 6 or 7 books to tell you about each year. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I might tell you a little bit about, why it's a favorite or how I learned about it or something along those lines. So let's just jump right in. So in 2016, I discovered an author that is now one of my favorites, and I may have come across this author on my own, but definitely this book was all over the place on social media, and so I jumped on the bandwagon and fell in love with Kristin Hannah, especially The Nightingale. This is still my favorite Kristin Hannah. I think I've read 5 of hers now. All 5 make me cry. I know she's not for everybody, but the way she tells stories definitely connects with me. This one is a World War II historical fiction, which I do like, and I liked that before Booktube, and I definitely still like it. So it was bound to be a favorite just by its nature, but we follow 2 sisters in World War II. I just love her storytelling, and I'm so glad that Booktube introduced me to Kristin Hannah. Another book that I found in 2016 that I absolutely loved, but had it been just for this cover, I would have never found this on my own. First of all, I didn't often shop in middle grade sections, even though I've always kind of read middle grade books. This is not one that would have called out to me, but this book absolutely broke my heart. I may have discovered it once it became a movie, because I would have seen the movie or heard about the movie and wanted to read the book. But Booktube introduced it to me first. So yay for A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. In this book, we follow a little boy whose mother is very sick, and he begins talking to this tree monster who tells him stories, basically to help him deal with his grief and anger. I've walked through some grief in my life, and I love reading about books that deal with grief in any way, and this one just absolutely broke my heart because I just felt so connected to this little boy and could understand the feelings that he was going through. I sobbed. So far we have a trend. Both of these made me cry buckets. The next 2 books are a little more fantasy related, and I have here Cinder, which is the first book in the Lunar Chronicles. I passed this book in Barnes & Noble many, many times. It was very popular when it first came out, but if you can see, there's like machinery in this girl's ankle, and Cinder is a retelling of Cinderella, but Cinder is a cyborg, so she's part human, part machine, and that just did not appeal to me in the least when I first saw this book. However, after hearing people talk about it on Booktube, I decided to give it a try, and I flew through all 4 of the Lunar Chronicles books, I think in 2 months. And if you know, Winter is like 800 pages. It's massive. I flew through the series, absolutely loved it. They're just such a fun fantasy fairy tale retelling story, YA. I just loved it, and I never would have picked it up if it weren't for Booktube. Another book that I heard about so much on Booktube is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This was super, super, super popular by so many of the people that I was watching at the time. I may have picked this up on my own, but I didn't ever geared towards fantasy, so, or magic or anything like that on my own before BookTube. I do read a lot more fantasy now, but it's mainly because of things that I hear people talking about. Night Circus is just that. It's about the circus that arrives at night. There's a lot of magic. There's kind of a magical competition between these two magicians and their apprentices, but it's a beautifully told story, and I think it would make an awesome movie. But yeah, The Night Circus is definitely a book that I fell in love with, and I'm thankful to BookTube for. The last ones that I want to talk about from 2016, I don't actually own yet. I really should, because I would love to reread these, and that is the Six of Crows duology with Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. These, again, are never books that I would have picked up on my own, and even when people were first talking about them, well, Six of Crows in particular, I just didn't, it didn't sound like something that would appeal to me. So I think when I first picked it up, I was kind of going in with really low expectations, because some people really didn't like it and others really did. So yeah, I was going in not knowing what to expect and not really having very high expectations, but I absolutely loved this duology, and am thrilled that BookTube introduced it to me. Now we're moving into 2017, and I have a bigger pile here, and I think in part that's because I watched a lot more channels. I branched out in the types of channels that I was watching. I think BookTube began to branch out as well, and at least, maybe it was branched out before, but I started to branch out and watch more than just people who read YA. I actually don't think I have any YA in this pile for 2017 of my favorites. I did still read quite a bit of YA, but in this pile of favorites, as I looked through my Goodreads from 2017, there were no YA that jumped out at me for the year. So yeah, I could see a little change in the trends of what I was reading and really enjoying. And some of these I specifically remember who talked about them, so I'll share that as well. Bree from Bree Hill, who reads very different from me in general, she talked about this book, The Rose Garden by Susanna Kearsley, and the way she talked about it absolutely made me want to read it. And now Susanna Kearsley is one of my favorite authors. She writes romantic books. I would not call them romance. There's a little bit of, I don't know what you would call it, supernatural aspect to them, or time travel in some way, at least of the 2 or 3 that I've read so far. I don't know if that's a trend in all of her books, but it definitely was in Rose Garden. This woman kind of finds almost like a portal back into an older time period and travels back there and becomes involved in a life in the past as well as her present day life. I love them. I loved The Rose Garden, and this got me on a kick, and I think I own 7 or 8 Susanna Kearsley books now. But yeah, thanks Bree at Bree Hill, I will link her down below, for introducing me to The Rose Garden and Susanna Kearsley. Another book that I'm not sure I would have picked up on my own is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. This was way popular when it first came out. It is historical fiction, and so because of that I may have picked it up on my own, but definitely BookTube was a huge influence in picking this one up. In this one we kind of follow the generations of 2 half-sisters in Ghana. One of them becomes a slave and the other marries a slave master, and each chapter chronicles the next generation, and we kind of bounce back between family lines, along that family tree. So it almost reads like short stories, but there is this family tie that connects them all. I found it compelling and important and difficult at times. I wanted to know more about each character throughout each chapter, even though the chapters are not super long. I found that Yaa Gyasi made me want to know more and more about each of these characters, and I learned so much about life in Africa throughout decades, as well as the slave trade, and because the one who becomes a slave travels to America, and then the history of African Americans from slavery until present day. Yeah, it was so informational, but written in such a way that was very compelling. I loved it. Loved it. Katie from Life Between Words definitely influenced me to pick up Peace Like a River by Leif Enger. This is one of her all-time favorites, and this again does not have a cover that appeals to me. I saw this all the time at library book sales and never picked it up because it just looks maybe like a boring read. I don't know. It isn't a very fast-paced read. It is relatively a quiet read, but the writing is gorgeous. The characters jump off the page. It talks about faith and family and this family tries to find the oldest son. So this father and his children try to find this oldest son who was accused of murder and runs away. So they go on this kind of road trip to try to find him, and we follow this family through those events. And it's kind of quiet, but such a beautiful, beautiful book. I should reread this soon because I really loved this one. Thank you, Katie from Life Between Words, who has become a dear friend, which is fun. Okay, so many. I was never big on science fiction, and because this is a movie now, I probably would have picked it up, but maybe very hesitantly. But everybody was talking about The Martian by Andy Weir, and Mark Watney is now one of my favorites. He's hilarious, and it's hard to make a book continuously compelling when the main character is alone on Mars. So there's not a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of science mixed in, but I never felt overwhelmed by it. I mean, I did feel like, I don't know what they're talking about, but it didn't feel dry or boring. It was very compelling, and I just am glad that BookTube influenced me to pick up The Martian. In 2017, I started my Goodreads read-along group. Did I start it in 2017? I think I did. Right in January of 2017 I started it, and our very first book was Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. That group has now been going, this is our third year, which is a lot of fun, and this was our very first book that we read together. It's been so much fun throughout the 3 years to read along with you guys and with others who have joined that Goodreads read-along group. It's very low-key. It's very, there's not as much discussion maybe as I would like sometimes, but we just read together and share what we're thinking. And Burial Rites was the first book that we read. Some liked it, some didn't. I loved this book, and it's about the last woman in Iceland to face the death penalty, and her story. It's also a relatively quiet book. It has a little bit of a different writing style than what I'm used to, but I really enjoyed it. It was pretty dark and grim, and Iceland, the setting was jumped off the page. It was almost its own character. Very cool book. Another book in 2017 that I probably wouldn't have picked up had it been just for the cover. This is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a post-apocalyptic, would you call it? There's a pandemic flu that wipes out the majority of Earth's population, and we follow events during the pandemic and also 20 years later, how people have survived, and we follow this band of artists, musicians and actors as they travel around putting on plays and music for the different settlements that have sprung up. I really loved this one. It's also a little bit on the slower side, but there were parts that were creepy, which I was not expecting. Yeah, and it was just very interesting, and definitely probably wouldn't have picked this up had it not been for BookTube, and now I'm really, really glad that I did. And probably the most surprising pick that I'm sharing from 2017 is one that, yeah, it's a horror. And I still don't read horror, really, ever. It's super short, and I just didn't want to I don't know. I wanted to give it a try. April from Getting Hugga With It is the one who most talked about Bird Box by Josh Malerman. And still to this day, she says this is one of the scariest or creepiest books that she has read. Which should have put me off totally from reading it. But I did a buddy read of this with Robin from Driftless Reader, and yeah, it was really good. Surprisingly. I was not expecting to like it, but I really did. It was creepy. I didn't want to read it at night, and I didn't. I read it during the day. It's pretty short, but I really enjoyed this, and it makes me think maybe I should give horror a little bit more of a chance than I do, but that's probably not going to happen. Let's be honest. But yeah, I am really glad that I read this one, and I have shared it with other people who don't read a lot of horror, so that's a bonus. That's a bonus. The last one I want to talk about from 2017 is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I read this one with Lindsay from The Wandering Reader, and it was one of my first buddy reads, I think, which is one of the reasons why it stands out. But Dark Matter is another science fiction, and it deals with quantum physics, which surprisingly wasn't hard to read about. We follow this man and kind of like how the choices that we make affect our lives, and what if each choice we make kind of splits off and has this alternate reality. That's part of the main premise. But this is one that I have shared with other people, and they have really enjoyed as well, which surprised them. So I'm just thankful that BookTube introduced me to Dark Matter. We are moving right along, and now it is time for 2018. I see in my reading that there are more and more and more books that I read that I love. As I looked back through the list of 2016, I saw that there was a lot of duds in there that I heard about on Booktube and I read but didn't really enjoy, like Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children and, oh, I don't know. I don't have the list in front of me, but things like that were very popular at the time, or I heard talked about all the time, and so I thought I'd give it a try, but I just didn't care for it. And I find that, as you can see, the pile from 2017 is much bigger, and I could have a huge pile from 2018 as well. It's harder to discover, though, even though I'm reading more and more books that I love, it's harder for me to pick out ones that I probably never would have read had it not been for Booktube, because now I'm so influenced by Booktube and the book community, Bookstagram as well now, that it's hard to think of ones that I probably wouldn't have read. So some of these I might have read, but there is still something special about them that I wanted to point out to you. The first two that I have, I actually had borrowed from the library. I don't own them. And the first is Tangerine, which is a thriller and a psychological thriller. And I don't read a lot of psychological thrillers. I'm often drawn to certain psychological thrillers. I was particularly influenced to read Tangerine by April, again, from Getting Huggy With It. She is a big influencer of my reading. and I loved it. I love Tangerine. Christine Megan is the author. It takes place in Tangier. The setting is very hot and oppressive. I read it in the summertime, which was perfect because it just had that stifling kind of a feel. It's about this woman who's almost agoraphobic, stays in her apartment most of the time. Her husband is there because of work and she's with him, but deals with a lot of fear. Then one day her old roommate from college shows up and things get a little crazy. So yeah, I absolutely loved that, and I'm so thankful that I read it. The other one that I don't own is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. And this is one that I might have read on my own. I honestly don't read a lot of just straight contemporary fiction, but I do enjoy it every now and then. And Eleanor O is definitely a favorite from last year. She's a quirky character who discovers herself as the book goes on, and things from her past, the trauma from her past and how that's impacted her kind of is a theme throughout the book. But also she's super awkward and doesn't have a lot of friends, but throughout the course of the book begins to build a friendship with two different people. And it's really beautiful story. It made me laugh at times. Her inner dialogue really was sarcastic at times and a little snarky, and I loved that. Yeah, I really enjoyed Eleanor O, and yeah, it was so popular on Booktube that I just couldn't resist the hype for that one. Another one that I read in this past year, 2018, that I definitely would not have picked up if it hadn't been for Booktube is this chunker, Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. When people describe this book, they talk about the fact that it's all about the building of a cathedral. And clearly you can see kind of the blueprints on the front. That would never appeal to me, and it's massive. So I'm like, there's no way I'm picking up this book. But I found it at a library sale or something, and so many people loved it, even though it's about the building of a cathedral. So I thought I'd give it a shot, and I did buddy read this with Doris from Aldi Books, and we both loved it. It's expansive. It covers decades of time, and we follow a lot of different characters. One of the worst villains that I've ever read is in this book. He just was horrible, and I would cringe every time he would come on the page. But we just follow all of these different characters, and I really got connected to them and to their lives, and yeah, it was really great. I loved it. And yes, it is about the building of a cathedral. So there were bits and pieces of it that were not as compelling as the rest, but overall, I really, really enjoyed this book and actually flew through it. I think it was less than 2 weeks that it took to read this book, which is major because it's like almost 1,000 pages. So yeah, thanks Booktube. Okay, I'm going to talk about Frederick Bachman next. Beartown is my third or fourth Bachman that I read. I discovered Frederick Bachman on Booktube for sure. I think I started with A Man Called Uva on audio, and that was the first one. But Beartown, I think, is my favorite of the ones that I've read so far. I did buddy read this with Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library, and we just loved this book. I think Frederick Bachman is my favorite character writer. He writes such quirky yet relatable characters. And this one doesn't have the quirky characters as much. This one deals with this town, Beartown, and the hockey team. In itself, that would be a reason for me not to pick up this book, because I'm not a hockey fan, and I don't really prefer books that focus so much on sports. And while hockey is a huge part of this book, it's really about this town and how they react to this situation where one of the hockey players sexually assaults another girl in town. And then the town kind of becomes divided over this situation. And so we kind of walk through that. Frederick Brockman, he throws in these like points to ponder almost, these nuggets of wisdom and thought that just make you stop and think. And that's in all of the books that I've read from him. And I really appreciate that. It's not beating you over the head with how to think, but just has these nuggets of and quotes. There's so many quotes that are in here that I could have pulled out and just read on their own. But yeah, I loved it. I love Frederick Brockman. He's definitely a favorite, and it's definitely because of BookTube introducing me to him. Another book that I don't have right now, because I've let somebody borrow it, is the only nonfiction in this pile, and it's The Road Back to You by, oh goodness, Ian Morgan Cron, I think is the author. This is a book that is an overview of the Enneagram, and I only know about the Enneagram because of BookTube. Because of a few people that I know and love who love the Enneagram, got me so interested in it, and this is the first nonfiction book that I picked up about it. I do have a couple others now. I have loved diving in and trying to explore what my numbers are. I'm a 9, and I'm pretty sure I'm a 9 wing 1. I haven't officially declared my wing, but I'm pretty sure I'm leaning towards a 1, which doesn't, both 8 and 1 seem opposing to a 9. Anyways, I'm not getting into the Enneagram. I'm not getting into it. The Road Back to You is a fantastic overview. For those of you who are not familiar with the Enneagram, it's kind of at its simplest, kind of a personality construct. It's so much deeper than Myers-Briggs. It's ancient. It comes from like way back. The Road Back to You doesn't get into too much of the history of it, but it does give you a fantastic overview of each of the different numbers. It gives you kind of a list of traits at the beginning. It talks about each number in their childhood and the ways that affects them as adults, what a healthy 9 looks like, what an unhealthy 9 looks like, and then each chapter ends with, if you think you're a 4 or a 7 or a 9, here are some steps that you can take towards becoming a more healthy 9. It has book recommendations. It has like practical things to do. Yeah, it's very, very simple to read, easy to read, and such a great overview. So yeah, The Road Back to You. I love learning about the Enneagram, and that's definitely because of BookTube. All right, this is getting really long, so I hope that you're still here. The last book that I want to talk about is probably one of my favorite results. One of the favorite things that has come out of me having a channel on BookTube is Middle Grade March. And so I'm just going to hold up The Girl Who Drank the Moon. I'm not sure I would have ever heard of this book had it not been for Middle Grade March and working together with Katie at Life Between Words to host Middle Grade March. It was kind of it all came about pretty randomly. Katie mentioned it once on her channel, and I messaged her right away and said, hey, I would love to host that with you. And so we just did. And we've only done it for 2 years, but it has become a highlight of my year. I already have people telling me they're thinking about books for next year, which you can read middle grade all year long. Don't save your pile for next year. I find myself doing that as well. But each year we've chosen a book to read all together. And last year was The Girl Who Drank the Moon. This year was Sweep. I'll put a picture here because I'm not going to get up to go get it. The Story of a Girl and Her Monster. And both of these were definite favorites of the year for me. In the midst of all the adult books that I've read, these middle grade books have withstood and hold their own with their deep themes and wonderful storytelling and incredible character writing. Yeah, I just have absolutely loved. This one is by Kelly Barnhill, and Sweep is by Jonathan Auxier. But yeah, Middle Grade March has definitely been a highlight of my BookTube journey, and those 2 group picks that we chose were among my favorites. So that is my pile. I loved going through and discovering which books were favorites throughout the last couple of years, and who influenced me to read them, if I could remember, and how my reading has changed or grown throughout the last couple of years. It's just been so much fun to reflect on that a little bit. I did promise a giveaway. There's actually 3 giveaways. So here's how it's going to work. I have 2 books, and then I have a gift card. So the gift card is for international, it's for everybody. America, international, everybody. So if you want to enter that, I'll tell you what to do in a minute. The 2 books are just going to be for people who are watching from the United States. I apologize, international, but the gift card, let me tell you about that first. I'm going to give $20 at Book Depository. So you can choose 1 book or 2 books. Whatever you can fit, up to $20, depending on what you choose. That is going to be for international. Yay! I love Book Depository, as long as Book Depository ships to your country. So that's for everybody. Everybody who enters the giveaway will be entered into the Book Depository. Then I also have my favorite book before BookTube, and I still kind of say that this is my favorite book of all time. It's been many, many years since I've read it, since before BookTube, so I'm not sure that it would be my favorite book now. But it is a Christian fiction. It's Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. This is a used copy. However, it's in perfect condition. I mean, there's not even a curl at the corners. So it's a retelling of Hosea from the Bible, where Hosea feels like God told him to marry a prostitute. And so in this book, it's historical fiction set during the California gold rush time. I love this book because I feel like I can relate to all of the different characters when it comes to my faith. Michael Hosea loves Angel unconditionally. The way that he loves is like the way I feel like God loves us, and like the way we should love other people. There's a judgmental brother. I feel like sometimes I'm like that. Angel continues to go back to her old way of thinking and her old way of living, and I feel like I do that as well. So I really feel like I connect with all the characters in this book in different ways, and so for that reason it's always the book that I think of first when I say it's my favorite book. So yes, this is one of the options. The other one is this hardcover copy of Beartown, which is also secondhand, but is also in perfect condition. I tend to prefer paperbacks, so I do have 2 copies of it. This one came first, but then when I found the paperback, I switched to that one. So I wanted to give this one away as well, because Frederick Bachman is one of my favorites of the last 3 years, and Beartown is my favorite Frederick Bachman. If you would like to enter for the gift card, all you have to do is comment below. I will put all of the comments into a comment picker, and that person will win the $20 at Book Depository. You do need to be subscribed to my channel. You do, and please don't subscribe to unsubscribe. I'm not announcing this giveaway, so hopefully you're already subscribed. However, some people just watch that aren't subscribed. So if you'd like to win the gift card, you do need to be subscribed. If you'd like to enter to win one of the 2 books, please also let me know which of the books you'd prefer, Redeeming Love or Beartown. And then also let me know a book that you've read that you've heard about on my channel, or the way that I talked about it influenced you to read it in some way. Maybe that's because you joined the Goodreads read along. Maybe you just heard me talk about it in a video. And if you can't think of a book that I've influenced you to read, tell me. I'm gonna fish for compliments here. Tell me the reason that you have subscribed and stayed around at my channel. I honestly, the most favorite part about BookTube for me is the comments and you guys, and knowing that there are people out there watching and interacting with me in some way. That's why I'm still here. And that has really been the most fun part about BookTube, learning about where you're from and what you like to read and what books I've influenced you read. I just feel like that would be so much fun. So comment down below. You'll be entered for the gift card. Let me know which book, if you're in the States, of the 2 that you'd like, if you want one of those. And then a book that you've heard me recommend, or a reason that you've stuck around. And all the winners must be subscribed. And I'm repeating myself now, so I'm going to stop. Thanks so much for being a part of the last 3 years of this journey. And here's to 3 years more. 3 years more or more? I can't speak. And here's to 3 years more, at least, right? Here's to, let's hope we keep going. Let's hope we keep going. I love you guys. Give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And comment down below. and I'll chat with you soon in another video. Bye!